5 minutes later, another man says, why couldn't we take the fire hoses and squirt water on it and move it away? Now, where did this man's idea come from? The blowing man's idea. In other words, since the first man said we could blow it away, and since nobody laughed, was that idea censored? Then it went into every other man's subconscious, and it was put into his computer as being a good idea, but could be improved upon. Now, if somebody would have laughed, would have gone in their computers? No, you would have kicked it out. By the way, after they got through, when you evaluate your brainstorming, 95% of your ideas are ridiculous. You throw them away. 5% are good. Is it worth it to have that many? All right, now what they did, as they evaluated the ideas, they found out that 3 fire hoses would reach. And this actually happened. They squirted water on the mine, and the pressure of the water moved the mine away from the ship sufficient distance they could start the motors, and they got away. Now, the next time you're about ready to kill one of your ridiculous ideas, think about blowing a mine away. Keep your idea, and then I'll show you how to be a genius. Let's take a simple story of a farmer who marries a city girl, takes her out to the country and brings the milk in a big crock and says, make butter. She doesn't know anything about butter, but she knows she's supposed to churn, so she puts it in the churn. She starts churning. A little yellow flake appears. She thinks for a moment, that'll ruin it. She takes a teaspoon and she very gently dips it out. As more yellow flakes appear, she dips them out. So finally he comes back in a half an hour later and says, where's the butter? She says, I don't know, there's no butter here. That's like the person who says, I haven't had any good ideas for 10 years. They've done what to every one of them? Killed them. Now I would like to tell you how you make butter tonight, and you'll know how you become a genius. That little yellow flake is on this side of the crock, and there's another little yellow flake on this side of the crock. And it so happens that these 2 yellow flakes belong to each other. The churning is for what purpose? To get them together. Now the minute they get together, they know they belong, and they go right together. Now I have 2 flakes together here and 2 flakes together here, and they belong together. So I'm churning them, and pretty soon they go together. Now eventually in this I have many clusters. I'm going to call this, I'm going to put it on the board, and we're going to call it the clustering effect. Now when butter finally emerges, it's almost as if it went clump. Now have you ever had somebody who was a genius and all at once they had a genius idea? Now can you compare that to making butter? Why was a genius allowed to come up with his idea? For 20 years he'd been doing what with his little ideas? Keeping every one of them, and he kept allowing them to cluster. And then one day he finally come to the point where all of them could go together, and now he comes up with a brilliant idea. Now you know the secret? Do what with all your ideas? Keep them. I'll tell you a way that I do it and a way that several people have done it, and it's been very successful. Buy 3x5 cards. Carry them on the sun visor of your car, by your bed, on your office desk, in your coat pocket. Every time you have an idea, write it on a card. Keep the cards, keep them in a manila folder. Now, do you write down every idea? The most ridiculous. You write them down, you put them on this little card. Now, I believe you should be creative all month long except for 15 minutes. And then for 15 minutes, I think you should analyze. And during this 15 minutes, throw away about 95% of them and keep 5%. Now, I know most people will be creative 15 minutes out of the month and judge the rest of the month. Will they have any ideas? By the way, not only will they not have any, will anybody in their family have any? No, this will be a family without ideas. Now, if I keep 5% and I put them back in the manila folder, what have I told my subconscious about these 5? These 5 are worthy. Have I programmed my subconscious to dig up more information? Now, I've done this, and this is beautiful. The next month, when I'm going to do my 15-minute analyzing, I have these cards in there that are from the last month. As I look at this card, what do you suppose hits me all at once? I can take a pencil and fill out this whole card, turn it over and fill out the whole backside, by the way, and put it back in the middle of the folder because it's not ripe yet. Now my subconscious knows what when it's back in the folder twice. This might be his $1 million. Well, we don't know, but let's work a little more special on this. One man who comes to the seminar quite regularly just invented a little tiny invention. His royalties last year were $800,000. Now there's 4 of them in it, and he has to split it 4 ways. So he only really got $200,000. Do we pay a premium for creativity? We do. I know an idea man that makes $100,000 a year. He plays golf whenever he feels like it. He doesn't come to work if he doesn't feel like it. The company bought a special plane for him because he likes to fish in some of these Canadian lakes that you can only get in with a seaplane. So he has a special seaplane. Anytime he feels like fishing, he can use the plane. Does he punch the clock? No, the man on the assembly line, he punches the clock because they want to get every minute out of him because they know that that's all they're going to get out of him. But this other man works for him 24 hours a day. Now they're going to register so many patents, and they do every year, and this allows them to stay ahead of the game. And where do the ideas come from? Well, maybe he's landing the plane on the lake about the time he gets another patent. Do they think he's worth $100,000 a year? In other words, I'm trying to show you tonight, if you want to be valuable, you'll be creative. If you don't want to be valuable, you'll be routine. Step number 7 is collaboration. 2 heads are better than 1 anytime, as long as 1 head makes the final decision. Now, there's a lot to this. Let's back up just a minute. If I have a problem, I bring in everybody I possibly can on this problem who has background and knowledge that could help me in the solution to this problem. I get all the ideas I possibly can from every one of them. And then I go away by myself and make a decision. And I assume full responsibility for the decision that I make. Now, if I didn't have a very good self-image, I would have them vote. And then I would take the majority, and I would, if it were wrong, I'd blame who? That committee. Now, can you see the weakness of group action? The group is never stronger than the leader. The leader must make the decision. But is it just as much a fallacy for the leader to say, I don't need anybody? And make a decision based only on his limited knowledge. So I believe in collaboration, even to the extent that I'll call people up and tell them I've got a problem. I know you don't have the solution now, but put it in your computer. I've done this in the whole seminar. I've told everybody a problem I've had. 4 or 5 days later, someone will call me up and say, you know that problem you told us in the seminar? Have you ever thought about doing this? I say, no, I never thought about it, but it sure sounds like a good idea. Does it cost me a thing for that idea? Once in a while, I've had somebody say, you know, you've been using my computer for a long time. How about taking one of my problems? I say, all right. By the way, can I program how many problems into my computer? Infinite. Just remember that. Infinite problems. Does it bog down my system to take one of your problems and program my computer? In fact, the more I use my computer, the more it is capable of solving more problems. So is it to my advantage to take your problems and put in my computer? Absolutely. So we say then that collaboration is when I secure as many people as I possibly can who have a background, who can understand the problem, to program their computers and have all the computers walking around in Portland solving my problems. Now, can you do that? This is the secret of success. And it's interesting to know, when I go to sleep at night, is the computer working all night long? No limitations of time or space. And I don't know how, nor have I ever figured out a way for you to be successful in this world without using your subconscious power. There's no way to do it. You're too limited in that administrative function of the conscious brain. There is no way to solve the problem. You've got to resort to the computer system You've got to resort to your subconscious. And therefore we say then that collaboration is the secret. Now, if you really understand this, is there anything wrong with a group of men meeting and saying we got these problems and outlining them and going out and having a good time? Is there anything wrong with you working on a problem until 10 o'clock at night, realizing it's impossible to solve it, throw it in your computer, relax, take a hot shower, and go to sleep and sleep like a baby all night long, and the next morning when you're shaving, bang! The thing drops into place so beautiful. When you look at that and you say, you realize that all the geniuses in the world working for the next million years couldn't have done it that good. What if you had stayed up all night long? Then what solution would you have had the next morning at 7? Frustration. You probably would have come to the conclusion it's impossible. You would have probably tossed it out by 7 o'clock the next morning. Are you beginning to see that there are secrets to having solutions in your life, that if you use them, you enjoy success? And wouldn't it seem like that persistence and bulldog type working all night long should be the secret of success? Well, if you believe in the Puritan ethic of hard work, you might go along with it. But would this be a solution which you couldn't have had any other way that I've just described? Only one thing, don't ever say it came from out of the blue. I mean, I think we should give credit where credit's due. It does not come out of the blue, it comes out of your own computer. This is a quote from Helen Keller. When we let a resolution or a fine emotion dissipate without results, it means more than lost opportunity. It actually retards the fulfillment of future purposes. Now we're talking about a resolution being the first 3 points. And when we let it dissipate without results, we're talking about eliminating 4 or the 7 C's. Then we say it destroys the fulfillment of future purposes, which means the whole creative arm is broken. Then I'd like to also explain why clustering works. And I'd like to show you that Sir William Herschel, who we consider the father of modern astronomy, actually, to make a telescope that satisfied him, I'd like to give you the number of failures that he encountered. There's only one thing different. He did not call them failures, he called them attempts. I think maybe sometimes we should change our word from failures to attempts. 200 attempts. Now I'd like to give you one other quote. Actually, I'd like for you to guess the length of time it took Brahms to write the first symphony. The thing that's in our minds almost always is 3 weeks for Handel's Messiah. I realize that earmarked all geniuses, they do it just like that. Take a guess of how long it took to write the first symphony. 20 years. Would you really stay with something for 20 years? Why should you be creative? And I want to give you 10 reasons tonight why you should be creative. Number 1. Your creator, who is the male role, whom you're to please, whose very wish or whim is your command, desires that you be creative. Therefore, to satisfy your creator, you've got to be creative because he created you to be a creator. The next advantage that I think is extremely important, and we'll get into this in interpersonal relationships, all interpersonal relationships, if they're going to be successful, have to be based on true empathy. The very essence of empathy is putting myself in your shoes. Now, are you already in them? Is it physically impossible? The only way on earth to do it is by imagination. Do I have to be creative to have empathy? The very act of projecting myself into your position is an act of creation. The third reason why I think you should be creative is the whole concept of cybernetics rests or falls on your visualization. As beautiful a law as it is, as powerful as it is, if you can't visualize it, can you have it? Therefore, can you change your self-image if you cannot see something that does not presently exist? Now we're saying then that the entire concept of cybernetics is based entirely on your creativeness. Do you realize we're talking about very important things in the art of living? All right, the next one is relaxation. There is no such thing as relaxation, now of course apart from drugs. True relaxation is the result of seeing myself relaxed. If I have not the ability to visualize a relaxed condition, I cannot be relaxed. We're saying now that relaxation is dependent entirely on a creative mind. Right? The next advantage of creativity is to have a sense of humor. It might be interesting for you to know that all humor is based on imagination. Would you like tonight to tell me one single humorous word? There is no such thing as a funny word in the English language, believe it or not. You can read a book and read the word laughter and never smile. The imagination has to have an image. Basically, humor in its essential forms is to put you here in a visualization, and then to suddenly let you know that that's not where you are at all, you're here. Then you have to move from point A to point B instantaneously by visualization. And there's only two things you can do, either cry or laugh. And since it's more acceptable to laugh than to cry, you laugh as you're moving from point A to point B. When you arrive at point B, is a joke over. Now you've arrived at the new position and there's nothing to be funny about because you now see it the way it is. Have you noticed that all jokes are a sudden shift from what you expected? Because you have presently visualized something and then they tell you that that's not what it is, it's this. So you move fast as you can over to what this is. And while you're moving, you're laughing. Now, to have a good joke, I want you to move a long distance. Last night I told a whole series of jokes. And they were very good jokes, but every one of them was based on the fact that there was a tremendous amount of distance that the people had to move, which made them laugh a long time. In other words, they kept laughing until they got to the new position. Another advantage of creativeness is that I can take a vacation all day long, dozens of times during the day, free, instantaneously. I can go to the coast in a matter of minutes. In fact, in 30 seconds from now, I can walk up my cabin at the coast, which doesn't exist, by the way, except in my imagination. There's a crack step, there's some sand that's filled the crack, I've got a rocking chair. I never carry firewood in, it's always there. I never have to have any kindling, it's always, I just light a match, it burns. I never have to take out any ashes. Beautiful situation. If I don't like it, and 1 second later I can get to the mountains to another cabin. In other words, your ability to take imaginary vacations is based on your creativeness. Now, what would happen if you couldn't take imaginary vacations? You'd crack. Your sanity is based on escape. I know some people are afraid to escape, and they're the ones that really get sick. I've had it asked, how much of my life should I spend escaping? That's based entirely on how creative you are. If you're putting these lug bolts on an assembly line, 3 weeks a year is enough. If you're very creative, then it should be 99%. Remember the executive that's going to the lakes in Canada? How much time does he spend escaping? Well, some weeks, all week. Can you see what I mean by this escaping? Does the tides teach us to escape? Would you like to go through everything in nature and watch the escape patterns? Recreation means recreate. Everything in nature teaches this law. If you're going to be successful, you're going to spend about 99% of the time pulling away from it in order to allow you to do what, that 1%? Boy, I mean, just come in there like the world was on fire, or the house is coming down, or whatever expressions you use. In other words, you got to have the tenacity, so you go in there like a wildcat. And the only way you can do that is to have come back from a vacation. If you've been so persistent you haven't let go, you probably have got lockjaw and you can't do anything. So we're saying then, the more creative you become, do you escape more? Look at the job description of an actual factory. Let's take the bottom line of workers. Pick up this tool, move it 2 feet, then move it over 6 inches and lay it down. By the way, I'm not exaggerating. I've seen some job descriptions that were almost like this. All right, now let's go up the chain of command. What's happening to the job descriptions? We're up to the president, and it says he does sundress duties. In other words, it doesn't really say what he does it? In other words, we've said that his job's so important that we can't write it down. We're saying that the more creative you become, the less we can define it. I'll tell you why we can't describe the president's job. One of the duties is golf. Another one is to have dinner. Another one is to take the executive from the other plant down at the country club Friday evening. How would that look in a job description? So it's better to say many different kinds of duties. You begin to see, though, what I mean. The more creative you become, the more you spend in escaping. That's why does your boss do as much detail as you do? No, the detail is routine, and is your boss performing more creative functions than you are? Then obviously, the higher up I go in the chain of command, do I become more creative, and do I do less routine? Right now, back to escaping as an advantage of relaxation of creativeness. If I'm going to really be successful, then do I have to escape? All right, can you escape without imagination, without creativeness? No. You begin to live and love life, and you'll begin to find that the joy of life is to delegate routine and assume the creative function. One of the advantages that we want to summarize in being creative is it's impossible for you not to become rich. Money is a byproduct of creativeness. The animals cannot create, but man can create. In other words, the creative function is the difference. This is the freedom that you have. This is why humans are better off than animals, because an animal can't program himself to think any differently, whereas a human can do anything on earth he wants. He has the most marvelous abilities to visualize anything he wants, and the law is just as clear as it can be. Whatever he visualizes, he has to become, and there's nothing on earth can stop it. Now, an animal, they're not allowed to visualize. Did you know God doesn't allow them to do it? Every goal that an animal has was put there by the Creator. Does an animal select his goal? An animal does not have the choice of selecting goals. Does man have a choice? There's your basic difference. Now, the choice that I am saying that man can select is this creativity. Does he not visualize something that doesn't exist at the moment? One other thing that we should mention, too, that's an advantage of being creative is time budgeting. Would you like for a moment to visualize it's tomorrow morning? And visualize I have just brought in one of the great geniuses of our time, who is a dynamo of creativity. And he's going to slip into your shoes for just tomorrow. Would he change anything? Yes, if he would change some things, then are there different ways to do things? All right, I'll give you an illustration. Now, I know that there are certain people who have certain jobs, and these jobs consume all their time. I know there are other people who do the same amount of work, they don't take any time at all. I like to take housework as an illustration. This one lady wakes up in the morning. By 10 o'clock, everything's done. The house is spotless. Everything is in ship shape. This other lady gets up, works all day, all night, all the next day, all the next night, all of her life. Everybody's sleeping, resting. It's 10:30 in the house, and what's she doing? Well, maybe it's ironing. She's working, and if you talk to her, she'll give you a tale of woe. A woman's work is never done. Have you heard this? Well, a woman's work is never done if she knows nothing about management. Some of you housewives might not like this kind of talk, but let me prove it to you. In Seattle, there's a sanitarium. And in this sanitarium, they have TB patients. These TB patients come in, and a large percentage of them are housewives. and they keep them there, and pretty soon they're released, they're all right. And then before they know it, they're back again. This was going along pretty good, but finally they come to the conclusion they didn't have enough space for people. If we stopped the repeats, we wouldn't need larger facilities. So another man said, well, what do you suppose is the reason? And they said, well, let's examine who are the repeats. And you know who they were? Housewives. So they set up a course called home management in this sanitarium. Now, when you were okayed by the medical doctor to be released from the sanitarium, you could not go home until you graduated from this course. Now, what do you suppose happened to the number of housewives that came back the second time with TB? It dropped off to practically nothing. We're saying then that if she learns to manage her home, does she become exhausted? No, and then she begins to do other things that allow her interests to develop, and she has less boredom. I have noticed this. Maybe some of you who sometimes have certain assignments to do in church, and you've got a certain project and you'd like to have it done. And you look across the entire congregation, who should I select? There's Mrs. Jones. She's not doing anything. She has nothing to bog her down. Do I want her? There's Mrs. Smith, and I think she's doing about 25 jobs already. I mean, it would be utterly impossible for her to have an extra moment to do anything else. Who do I select? I select the busiest person because I know that they're going to do it the fastest. All right, back to our advantage of creativeness. If you are creative, can you see a different way to do your schedule tomorrow? Maybe we should go back to the way if someone performs an act if he's not using creativeness. There's two ways to do things. Number one is trial and error. That's the way 95% of Americans operate. It's also the way the rats operate too. The other method is creativeness. All right, let's go through the rat method first. Monkeys do it too. All right, I have a rat and I put it into this maze. And there are 6 doors that can go through. One door goes directly to cheese. And one door happens to take an hour through the maze and it arrives at the cheese. All right, now by trial and error, the rat tries and he goes through the door that takes an hour. He works his way through and he arrives at the cheese. The next day I set him into the maze again. What's he do? He goes back to the door that he used yesterday. He spends an hour, doesn't he? Do you know that rat will spend the rest of his life doing that? That's trial and error. Trial and error means I try until I find one method that works and then I do it forever. Creativeness means I find 10,000 ways to do it, and then I choose the best way. Do you realize tonight that there are people who are so creative that they could do all you're going to do in the next year in 10 minutes? They make 300,000 and you make 3,000. Is there a difference in the way we live?